Hi, I'm Shelby Williams with Plano City Council. For tonight's recap, I'm coming at you without my jacket on. I'm freewheeling a little bit, flying by the seat of my pants. I'm a loner, Dottie, a rebel. So we had two big items come up tonight. The first, as everybody who is a regular viewer of this recap would know, we were discussing the Campaign Finance Recusal Ordinance that was first passed late last year, was brought up for repeal earlier this year in August. But many citizens came out to speak and impressed upon the council at that time that they wanted the recusal ordinance to stand. They felt it was important, as I did, of course, if you watch that recap and everything that came before. It was important to uphold the integrity of the votes on council, and that we signal to the public that that integrity of the votes of council. So in very brief recap, within the recap, kind of creepy, recap within a recap, of the ordinance itself, it says that if any council member receives more than $1,000 in contributions from parties with a material interest before council in a vote, like council is voting on something for which somebody has a material interest, and that somebody has given $1,000 or more than $1,000 to that council member, the council member should recuse themselves. We already have laws requiring recusal if somebody receives personal remuneration from a contractor or an employer, etc. And this was intended to extend that philosophy to not just personal remuneration and income, but to campaign contributions. The idea being that nobody should be able to buy a council member's vote by getting that council member elected just so they can vote on my project, contract, economic development incentive, etc. So it could apply to a number of areas, but long story short, or less long, it has to do with people with a material interest before council. We are all interested in what our property tax rate is going to be. It's not meant to be broadly applicable things like that, even though we do stand to gain or lose materially based on the tax rate. It's meant to be of specific interest to somebody with a specific vote for before council. So it passed late last year, and it was brought up for repeal in August, but council at the time said, okay, we've heard the community. They want the ordinance to stand. We're not going to repeal it. So we discussed at that time having a working session to discuss how to strengthen the ordinance, how to plug some of the loopholes, etc. Well, that working session was tonight during the preliminary open meeting. We discussed several things, and we landed on everybody's fine to keep it in place. One of the things we want to do was Mayor Pro Tem Prince suggested that we time box it, say contributions within the past 2 years. I recommended that we change that to a rolling 4-year period because we serve 4-year terms, and for some things that are a big deal that have a really long runway, you might give a campaign contribution more than 2 years in advance for a vote that you know will be coming up in 2.5, 3 years. So there was enough consensus for a 4-year rolling average, and that modification will be coming back before council at a future meeting to adopt that amendment. A few other items were discussed. I don't think there was enough support for direction for some of the additional things that were proposed, one of which was putting teeth in it. Now, as city council, we can't establish any felonies, but we could establish a Class C misdemeanor. So I personally would like to see that. Hopefully that's something we can get done in the future. I would also like to see revised language to make it apply to PACs. Now, if you've read what I've written about PACs previously, I don't have a problem with PACs in and of themselves. PACs are like political mutual funds. So instead of purchasing a stock like Apple yourself, you're investing in a diversified mutual fund. But PACs have the potential to be abused. So I'd like to see language regarding contributions from PACs where there were material contributions into the PACs by people with a vote coming before council. All in all, however, the big news of the night is that there is no appetite to repeal it. we're going to make a modification or potentially more modifications to it. So once again, the citizens have proved that making your voice heard works. Maybe not always, but you fail 100% of the time you don't try. And it is critical that members of the public make their voice heard with their elected officials about matters important to them. And this is just one such occasion. That led us to the only item for individual consideration on tonight's agenda, which was tweaking the zoning at the Collin Creek redevelopment. Nothing which changed the amount of residential units. It was just changing a number of the parameters. There was a 31-page document that had the overviews of what was being done in each sector. Nothing really exciting. It passed unanimously. It also passed P&Z unanimously when it came up before P&Z. Little things like the number of paseos that were required in the open space for a certain lineage of building, and that lineage being changed from I think it was 120 feet to 150 feet, little things like that. Nothing of material concern. This actually came up before council a few meetings ago, and it had to be tabled due to a technical reason. So it came back up tonight. We voted on it and it's done. That was the only item for individual consideration, and thus concludes the recap for this Plano City Council meeting. I'm Shelby Williams. Thank you and God bless.